afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is the official launch of an initiative that I'm very proud to be part of, #FragranceForwardTFF. As chairman of the Fragrance Foundation Board of Directors, I'm dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion as the #1 priority of the Fragrance Foundation today. I know very well that all our members are tackling DE&I with great urgency, but also with great passion and commitment. We all want to see change, and we know we can and will do more. The work of the Fragrance Foundation will no doubt enable deeper discussion across our membership that I'm certain will accelerate change. Our definition of diversity goes beyond gender to include all contexts in which people may identify themselves as part of a minority group. These include ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, different abilities, age, and variety in life background. Our broad-based understanding of diversity is about embracing the power of inclusion of minority groups, securing the engagement of all our members, and empowering the best of their creativity and innovation. In order to drive diversity, inclusion, and belonging everywhere in our industry, we are all committing to ambitious goals that no doubt will drive change. We aim to be a diverse industry that fosters a strong, inclusive culture that respects every employee for who they are. We know that diverse teams operating within an inclusive environment have proven to be higher performing, more agile, and faster in responding to change. So not only are these goals simply the right thing to do, there is no doubt that these initiatives will greatly benefit our bottom line. I'm certain today's webinar will be insightful, thought-provoking, and with a single-minded version to demonstrate that while the fragrance industry is fully engaged in DE&I, there is still much to be done to propel us forward. For me personally, I hope we will inspire participants to feel included and build a career in the fragrance industry. So welcome to #FragranceForwardTFF, Industry Perspectives on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm very pleased to introduce TFF's President, Linda Levy.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome to the hundreds of people who are joining us today for this momentous event. #FragranceForwardTFF is the Fragrance Foundation's formalized DEI headline for a program with multiple elements. We are providing a sustainable platform for the entire industry to share and exchange ideas, experiences, and perspectives. We are creating real-time opportunities and access for historically excluded communities. Our goal for #FragranceForwardTFF is to foster a fully inclusive industry that truly represents the world that we serve. I could think of no better group of industry professionals than the ones we have with us today. Their stories of challenge, triumph, and success are truly inspiring. They have all lent their time, resources, and voices to TFF programs through the years and have all committed to helping us drive this initiative forward today and always together. So let me thank in advance and introduce to you that our panelists will be Chris Collins, founder, World of Chris Collins; Corey Smith, Head of Diversity and Inclusion for North America, LVMH; Rob Smith, CEO and founder, The Fluid Project; and Linda Song, Senior Perfumer at Givaudan. Before we begin, I just want to note that our moderator, Helen Shelton, is an award-winning strategist in the luxury marketing sector. She is an expert on DEI communications, and she has worked with flagship brands including Prada, Perrier Jouet, Hermes, and Judith Lieber, just to name a few. She will help us at the Fragrance Foundation to help advance DEI and engage consumers and communities representing the full spectrum of diversity. Lastly, many thanks to all of you who shared your questions in advance. While we cannot respond to each question today, we selected questions that are in alignment with the theme of today's program. And for the questions we haven't answered, we will include them in the Fragrance Foundation's digital magazine called Accords later in the month of October. So I'm very proud to now turn the program over to Helen Shelton.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Linda. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and everyone as we kick off this very important initiative. So let's get into it. Let's just jump right into the questions for this amazing panel. And the first question is, well, tell us about your journey. And this is really directed toward all of the panelists. Tell us about your journey in the fragrance industry and what inspired you to build a career in fragrance? If we could just go around, could we start maybe with Chris? Tell us about your journey and what inspired you to build a career in fragrance.
Sure. Helen, thank you for moderating, and thank you to all the incredible panelists here, and President Linda and Charnay and everyone who had everything to do with this. I really appreciate the opportunity. Basically, my career started with an obsession for fragrance. I've always been in love with perfume, cologne, however you want to identify it with. And then about 20 plus years ago, I entered into the world of fashion, and I learned more about fragrance working for Ralph Lauren, and then meeting Killian, who ended up being my mentor, taught me more about the industry. We worked on a couple of projects together. And I fell in love with it even more because now at this point, I'm learning about the perfume creation process. And we had a very deep conversation about me starting my own brand. And it was a real honest one because he told me that it was going to be tough. It wasn't going to be easy because no one in the perfume, well, very little people in the perfume looked like me. And I saw this as an opportunity to launch something and do something incredible as a person of color, owning their own brand and butting up against, the Tom Fords and the Killians and the Creeds in the perfume world. So an obsession turned into a business, and understanding the journey was going to be really tough. It's gotten a little easier because, as you all know, any person who is a minority in any situation, whether you're Black or a woman or LGBTQ, you have to work 3 times as hard because you almost have to prove yourself in order for people to, take you serious. So I feel like I'm still proving myself, but, the journey has become a little less arduous, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris. Linda, what are your thoughts? Tell us about your journey in the industry and what inspired you to build a career in fragrance?
And well, as a perfumer, mine is actually a love story. It's a love story with raw materials. For me, it was about knowing where they come from, how they arrive on a perfumer's palette, the olfactive nuances that they have that sometimes only someone who intimately knows them or understands them will see. But also, I think what inspired me most about perfumery as a career is that it's constant exploration. It can be as obvious as discovering a rare flower that only grows in one place of the world, or as simple as just a new perspective on a combination of classic ingredients. So I think for me, it's about creating sometimes the fantastical, sometimes the familiar, but always with the hope of something new. But growing up, of course, I had no idea this industry or profession even existed. And I happened on an article about a chemist that was in an industry. And that's what led me to ISIPCA. And I think related to our conversation today, a pivotal point in my career was applying to the Givaudan Perfumery School. My application letter centered around the duality of being both Korean and America, and the idea that I'm not just one or either, but I'm equally both. So my Confucian upbringing with my American ideals and then some influence from France along the way really enrich, I think, how I live and hopefully how I give back in both my creative work and the people that I work with.
Amazing. Rob, what about you? Tell us about your journey and what inspired you to be in the fragrance industry.
Well, as always, my journey is twisted and turned in ways that I never expected. And, I started off in a traditional retail way, starting working at Macy's. And in that time, I actually had fragrances and really enjoyed it. Mostly of it at that time was around the celebrity part of fragrances. And then I went on to work in other corporate jobs, and then decided to merge my profession, which is retail, and my passion, which is social justice, and launched the Fluid Project, which started off as the world's first gender-free store. And certainly it was all about, apparel and accessories and redefining fashion and how it was very binary, and creating a space in the middle for everyone. And why should anything be, strictly male or strictly female? It should just be what makes you feel good, what brings out your authentic self. And so I created this company built on values, built on a mission statement to challenge boundaries with humanity. And I was approached by Scent Beauty and Steve and the team to say, hey, would you like to create a fragrance or a scent collection? And we did. And it's, been an incredible journey learning about this business, because I'm kind of relatively new to it. But it's been a great experience of creating the scents, and also understanding that scents are traditionally male or female. And what makes something male, I guess, is woodsy, and something female, feminine, and female, like florals, and then merging those together and creating these really unique scents that have always existed, but have been put in a box, male or female. So we have, because we're grounded in values, we've also named all of the scents our values, which brings out a real deep sense of being, like intention and integrity and humanity. And so it's been a wonderful journey, and I appreciate Sephora for helping us along this journey, and the Fragrance Foundation for kind of holding my hand as a newbie and entering this space. It's been incredibly rewarding, I can tell you that.
Wow. So Corey, what's the scoop? Tell us about your journey and what inspired you to get into the industry.
Absolutely. And again, I echo Chris's sentiments, and thanking you all for allowing me to share this space with some great panelists. Just hearing their stories, it's amazing. I'm humbled and honored. I can't even consider myself in the fragrance industry after listening to their stories. But I am new to the corporate side of this industry in my role as the head of diversity and inclusion for LVMH. Obviously, we own fragrance brands. I think, for me, my career has been over 20 years in diversity and inclusion. The beautiful thing about the seat that I sit in is I am technically industry agnostic, right? It doesn't matter what industry I'm in that I'm doing this role for, because the role is really around creating equity and parity across the board for everyone, regardless of industry. The benefit and pleasure and honor of doing it in this luxury goods industry, which also services fragrances, is really introducing new concepts and new ideas to an industry that honestly prides itself on history, right? And quality and craftsmanship and the savoir-faire of how we arrive at our products. And really being able to continue those awesome narratives around legacy, yet introduce innovation through the lens of diversity and inclusion, such as Chris and such as Linda and such as Rob, is actually what my role is all about. And so again, this journey for me is new. I'm just beginning, but happy and excited to be alongside such great folks.
Wow, well said. So yeah, this is really great. So my second question really is actually for Chris and for Linda. What are some of the challenges that people of diverse backgrounds face in an industry that has been typically predominantly European, white, and male? Tell us a little bit about that, Linda. What are some of your challenges that people face?
Yeah, I really see it in two different ways. I think first, to just the question, having white European males as leaders means we continue to hire and promote mostly white European males. I love this question because I need to address the fact that I'm representing the female population of the industry on this panel, which is still not being represented in an equitable way. Our industry has a lot of room for improvement when it comes to parental leave, childcare benefits, fertility, adoption, surrogacy support, and I think probably most importantly, pay equity. The pandemic has further highlighted challenges that women face. And I think if we're going to both attract and retain talent, we need to make these changes. On the second part of that question, I think in regards to challenges people from diverse backgrounds face, for me, it's being understood. Speaking for Asian Americans, we have a reductive title of model minority because it's assumed we're assimilated and relatively successful. Fortunately, it's becoming more commonly known as the model minority myth because it discounts for all the ethnic groups that are included under Asian umbrella. Chinese, Thai, Filipino, Indian, Samoan can sometimes have little to nothing in common. And, historically, the model minority myth was pitting Asian Americans against other underrepresented groups, very specifically African Americans. And it was with the purpose of essentially downplaying racism. So here in America, Asians are, and globally, I've really noticed, we're expected to quietly and happily accept discrimination, grateful for our positive stereotype, but at the same time being treated as a foreigner or being a target of violence. And it's a question of human dignity. So, this last year, it's really been highlighted with all of the Asian attacks that have been happening globally and demonstrating that there is an underlying racism against Asians. And my hope is that this last year has demonstrated how people have historically not been treated equally. And if someone is telling you of their own personal experience, that you would listen with an open mind and heart.
Very insightful. Thank you, Linda. So, Chris, what do you feel have been some of the challenges in this industry?
Well, excuse me, as a Black man in perfume, I'm already an anomaly because most men and or women in perfume are white and European. So, like I said before in the opening, I feel like I have to work twice as hard in order to be respected in the perfume industry. But I knew that. I knew that going in. So I wanted to make sure, I studied and really knew the craft before I entered into the space. So I actually went to France and, learned the history of perfume and the Fragonards. And, I went to Grasse, which was an incredible experience. Of anyone who wants to be in a perfume industry, I suggest you go because it's a very insightful experience. But I knew that it was always going to be a challenge. And it still is a challenge, even after I launched in 2018. So it's been a few years, and even still, it's a challenge. After all the racial unrest of 2020, there were retailers who had, decided that they were going to do a pledge to have more Black-owned brands on shelves. And that kind of gave me more opportunity to be, to see myself on the shelves of some of these retailers. But the one thing that I wanted to make sure when I had the conversations with the buyers and the people that work for the retailers was that I want you to take my brand because it's worthy of being in your store. Don't take my brand only because I'm Black. I don't want to be part of a pledge. I want to be there because I belong. And, I've proven that, and that's something that I knew that was going to be a challenge. There are some retailers who came out and made statements about Black Lives Matter and, wanting, to be more inclusive. And then you look down the board, they don't have any Black-owned brands. Now, whether you have my brand or not, there are other Black-owned perfume brands that I'm in love with that aren't given the chance. And the one thing that I've always stressed in this industry is opportunity. Give me the opportunity, to show you, that my brands can stand next to anyone else that you have on the shelf. And, I applaud those retailers who have given me the opportunity, but we still have a long way to go. Like I said, there are other incredible Black-owned brands, minority-owned brands, women-owned brands, LGBTQ-owned brands. And I think that what me, Linda, Rob, and Corey, what we're doing is we're kind of being the trailblazer isn't always easy. You know, going through the forest with the machete and trying to cut down the trees is a tough road. But it's our responsibility to clear that path for those behind us, for those who wish to be perfumers or to work for LVMH or to own brands or to work in HR. There's so many different areas where you can be part of the perfume industry. And I take that very seriously. So if not for nothing, when it's all said and done, I hope I'm remembered for opening the doors for others when those doors were closed at one point. So
Brilliant.
that's
Brilliant. Wow, great. Thank you so much. So actually, let's move on to our third question. And this one is for Corey and for Rob. So how can advocacy, allyship, activism, the three A's, I call it, how can those three, advocacy, allyship, and activism, play a role in advancing diversity? And the second part of this question really also has to do with consumerism. How do these three things play a role in attracting and engaging consumers from historically excluded backgrounds? Rob, you want to go first? You're on mute.
All right, here you go. So I'm going to back up for a second and answer your question with a few thoughts. First of all, visibility matters, representation matters. And when I look at many fragrances, scents, I look at how it's presented, and it's very limited. Like when you look at who is the model, who are in the campaigns, I think it reinforces social constructs around gender. You know, what does it mean to be female? What does it mean to be male? And I think the fragrance industry has a lot of work to do, and what beauty is considered and how almost archaic and dated it is. And especially when it comes to the sex around gender. And so one of the things that we did was when we created the Faces of Fluid, used, as we do with our brand, radical inclusion when it comes to gender identity, when it comes to body size, when it comes to ability, race. Our models reflect what I see as beauty, which is beauty of authenticity. And we cast, trans models, we cast body positive models, Latinx models. We continue to lean into visibility and representation because that matters when people see themselves in campaigns. And a lot of that doesn't happen in this industry yet, and hopefully it's happening more. But as far as the core consumer for Fluid is non-binary and trans folks. And the challenge we have every time we walk into a retailer is there's not really a space for us, that we have to create a space in the middle. And that space opens up a lot of opportunity for people to be themselves. And a large part of what I've learned through this process, I'm queer myself, but the queer spectrum goes from, I would say, gay, white, straight passing men to Black trans females. And there's a huge disparity between the two. Even within our own community, the life expectancy of a trans woman of color is 35 years old in this country. And that is a shocking number that needs to be fixed, because that layers on identities, being female, being Black, and being transgender. You add those three together, the equation equals a very short life expectancy, and not an easy one. So that just compounds the issue. What we've decided to do is, through this process, is create Get Fluid gender expansive training, teaching companies and corporations about gender diverse folks, about gender expansive folks, and also gender expressive folks, and teaching companies how to become an ally. And going back to the original question, what is an ally? An ally is somebody who understands who you are. So doesn't necessarily firmly agree with you, but they support you in understanding who you are. And I think education or allyship is through education. You know, it's not going to me and asking Chris, what's it like to be a Black person? How can I help? You know, that's not how it's done. You have to go educate yourself. And there are a lot of resources for everybody to educate themselves. And you do the education first, and then listen sit there and take an opportunity just to listen and to learn, and then to yield space, and then act. And then the action is, how can I help you? How can I, in my place of privilege, my position of influence, how can I help you and advance opportunities for you and the group that you represent? Then there's a flip, there's a jump to advocacy. And advocacy is when you listen and learn and you decide to take action. You decide to actually reinforce change within your company or your friends. When you see somebody misgendered, when you see somebody, there's a lack of representation in a group, is when you start to advocate and start to ask for change. And then activism, which is my favorite place, is when you jump from advocacy to activism and you're willing to stick your neck on the line to make change happen. And we've seen a lot more people lean into activism. And it takes courage to do that, because you may lose your job. You may piss some people off. You may make some people uncomfortable. But change doesn't happen just with allyship. Change happens with advocacy, and real change happens with activism. And so I encourage folks to lean into that space, to be uncomfortable, have conversations, and fight for equality and justice and equity.
Brilliant. So Corey.
I don't know how I can follow Rob. I don't know. I can't follow Rob. Rob is perfect. But so what I will say, and Rob's answer was brilliant in that, and I even appreciate the question, in that there is a distinction between those three terms.
Yes.
Right? People use those words interchangeably, but they are not the same. And so the degree to which you are willing to lean into any moment around any issue is what differentiates those three terms. And again, I won't reiterate Rob's descriptions or definitions of them, because he did an excellent job. What I will say is, as it relates to advocating, being an ally, or being active around a marginalized or disenfranchised or underutilized community, a key component of that, and Rob said it, is involving that community, right? And so it's not one directional. This is not charity. This is not philanthropy. This is two directional. Rob said you had to educate yourself. You have to be an active listener from what the needs and services of that community are, in order to effectively engage. Because to leverage your privilege, you have to know what you're leveraging to go, and what the tangible results are that you're trying to achieve on the other side. And so, I think where it plays a role in this industry is twofold. Internally, in the industry, obviously we need more diverse creators and innovators and entrepreneurs and business folks that are leading this charge around creating new product. The infrastructure of the industry needs more diversity. We need to hire more, retail outlets that are owned by people of diversity. Where's Chris going to put his product, right? Fine, he can sell it on his website, but it should be in retail outlets that are supporting him, again, as he said, because it's a great product, not solely because it's produced by a Black man. Same with Linda. And so the infrastructure also needs more diversity. And then there's the external component in which you are proactively pushing this product or these products or the owners or the diversity of it out into the marketplace in a way that actually celebrates it. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the piece. The marketing has to be celebratory. There's a fine line between, culture appreciation and culture appropriation, right? That appreciation part is, I see you, I value you, I'm acknowledging you, and I'm celebrating you. Yes. And that is where I think a lot of our industry is still trying to grapple with. How do I celebrate something that is unfamiliar to me, but I also don't have anybody around me that looks like what I'm trying to celebrate to tell me about it? And so that's the internal part. We got to invite people into the decision-making table, enough voices, enough lenses, widen our aperture to appropriately, authentically celebrate everything that these folks are trying to do. J'adore, one of our perfumes, right? Perfumes Christian Dior. J'adore just launched a new campaign where the tagline is, life is not black and white, life is gold, And of course, it's the gold bottle. It's some, there's a tie there. You marketing folks get where they're going with it, right? But they had such a hard time with, can we actually save this? Given this climate of the world where we're in, given the moment, this is them proactively and intentionally trying to embrace diversity. In their brain, this is a great thing. In my brain, as the D&I person that said, okay, let's go with this. We're going to put ourselves on the line here. Let's go with this. But they were hesitant. Like, okay, we don't want to come off as disingenuous. We don't want to come off as if we're trying to appropriate. We don't want to come off as if we're trying to capitalize on this moment of social, racial, civil unrest. But we want to do something. And so that level of care and detail and authenticity around a need to be more diverse and be proactive in being more diverse is what a whole lot of other brands need to focus on and need to do. So, but it took a level of advocacy, allyship, and activism. Activism is, all right, we're going to go for it and we're going to do this campaign. And it's with beautiful brown and black skin tones. And no disrespect to Charlize Theron, who's our brand ambassador for J'adore. We love her. But it was also time to represent something else in our marketing, right? Because as Chris said, around some of these pledges that are enacted and some of the things which are beautiful, right? My issue with a lot of those pledges is that's 50% of the problem. 50% of the problem is we need more diversity on our shelves and in our stores. And we know that. Diverse product created by diverse people for diverse people. What we're not talking about is the other 50% is, well, now what? Guess what? I've got to go get more diverse people in the store to go buy the product, right? Having Chris's product on the shelf, but then it doesn't move, isn't helping anybody. We've got to get it on the shelf and then get it off the shelf. Somebody's got to come in and buy it. And so where's the proactive marketing that increases the diverse foot traffic to get Chris's product off the shelf? Because the downside is they'll get it on the shelf through their pledge. And then guess what happens? When nobody buys it, they'll blame it on Chris. They won't blame it on themselves and their inability to create a true marketing campaign behind it. They'll blame it on Chris and blame it on the product and say, well, it wasn't the right thing for us. No, you only solved 50% of the problem. You didn't do the whole 100% was, let's get this product off the shelf now that we've got it on the shelf. That was a lot. I'm sorry. You can't get me started.
Yeah. A round of applause. That was brilliant. What a wonderful conversation this is. I wish we could keep it going.
Can I kind of lift up real quickly off of what Corey said? That, a lot of times when it comes to action, people go straight to marketing. They go straight to marketing. Let's market this. Let's take this campaign and let's put, more racially diverse people. Let's put more gender diverse people into campaigns. But that means nothing if it doesn't start off with intention. It doesn't start off with actually doing the work inside, which is why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? How do we educate our team? And then how do we create an authentic campaign that resonates with people, that isn't tokenism, that isn't just a marketing campaign? And I think a lot of folks are afraid to cross over because they haven't done that work. And that work takes time. And you can't launch a campaign in spring until you do all the work. And it takes a little bit of time and really and a full commitment throughout the organization from the leadership all the way down. And it has to have that kind of commitment so it does come across as authentic. So you don't show up with the best of intentions and get called out because it is just tokenism, pure and simple.
And that's the fourth
Can I? Sorry,
authenticity. Authenticity is the fourth A. Go ahead, Chris.
There's something that Corey said that struck a nerve in me because he is spot on, because this is the conversation that I have with the buyers and the retailers and the DMMs. I need your support. It's not just enough to bring me in because, either I, have, checked the list on a pledge that you wanted to do, and my product is good. My product belongs in that space, but I need your support. It's not enough just to bring me in. As a matter of fact, all the brands need the support, but especially since I am in a space where, when I partnered with Bergdorf Goodman and partnered with Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus and Sephora, I am the first Black-owned fragrance brand in every retailer. So that's a moment. That's a very historic moment.
Yes.
But I don't just want to be in the store. I want to be successful in the store. So what do we do to, ensure that? I'm going to bring the product. I'm going to, bring myself. I'm happy to do appearances and talks and master classes and everything else. But what are you going to do on your end? And that is the conversation that I have before I enter into any space with any retail partner. So I think what Corey said was spot on, because that is the one conversation that I have all the time with the retailers. It's not enough just to have us. You have to support us. It's not enough for the fragrance house to have Linda. You have to support me. It's not enough for a retailer to say, Rob, we want to bring your brand in. Okay, well, you have to support me, and you have to believe in the values that my brand believes in. And I think that can have everything in this space and diversity, equity, and inclusion move forward.
Really, really great insights. This is just too good. So actually, this next question is really for the panel. What words of advice would you give to anybody that needs to break barriers and build a career in this industry? Whether it's scent making and what have you. But what barriers would you tell people and help people to sort of break down if they're interested in getting a career and started in this industry? That's for everybody.
I guess, I have no right to answer this question, I don't think, because it came to me. But I can say that if this is your passion, and this is what you believe in, reach out to people who you can. We're all accessible. I think that's what's really amazing is if you go to LinkedIn or if you go to some other platforms, just reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm interested in this industry. What insights do you have? And people are incredibly excited. I say 50% of the people that I reach out to on LinkedIn return my message back to me, which is pretty amazing that they're that accessible. You can reach out to the Fragrance Foundation, but if that's your passion, that's your dream, then don't let anything hold you back. Don't let any words that anybody says that you can't do it hold you back. You can do anything you want. And I found that as big as I dream, my dreams are, I can't dream big enough. Once you decide to get into the space that fills you, that makes you feel like you have found your purpose in life, that it taps into your passion and becomes your profession, then nothing can stop you. Nothing can stop you at all. So, and just believe in yourself and show up with conviction, and people will pay attention. People listen. And if you are diverse in your race and your gender and in any one of your identities, people are beginning to open up and look. And there's a window of opportunity right now that's being created that we're together working on, and you can lean into that, take advantage of that.
Linda, what about you? What words of advice would you give to anybody that needs to break through in the industry?
I totally agree with Rob on this idea of passion, because I think every perfumer who's gone into the industry and lives it as a career, it's about passion. And I think to get there, it's accompanied with persistence. And I think that really crosses all professions and race and, whatever background you have. And so it really is about, oftentimes perfumers, we say we get told no or we're crap multiple times a day. And it's about how you just kind of, shake it off and you keep going. And that's really just like the life lesson, right? It's just how many times you get told that you can't make it, that you can't do it, but then you just keep fighting. And, I think especially for perfumery is a tough industry position to get into. If you just get told no once and you give up, of course you're never going to make it. I think that applies really to everything. So, on another aspect, I think more specifically, education and knowledge are huge. Those are just the foundations, right? You have to have that. And then especially our industry, having mentorship and advocates for you is also very, very important. Chris mentioned that. He's like, support me, and every person who has come up in the industry has been supported by someone or some people along the way. And otherwise, you're never going to make it.
Great. Corey.
Everybody's already made some great points. I think the only thing that I'll add, kind of through my lens of kind of being on the corporate side, and I would tell this, to anybody, from entrepreneurs to those that kind of work in a more corporate environment, is I've worked in several industries in which there is a distinction between kind of like the creatives and the suits, right? I'm a suit. I own my suit. I know it. I don't pretend to be on the creative side of the business. When I worked in sports, there was a difference between the athletes and those of us that worked in the office. And so in this industry, there is, again, LVMH is not just fragrance, but it's fashion and it's beauty and skincare and it's wines and spirits. And we've got a full portfolio. There is always the creatives and the suits. I think there is a level of collaboration that is needed in order to be successful. The creatives can't function without the suits and vice versa. The suits can't function without the creatives. Otherwise, we have nothing to sell, right? And so sometimes the silos are so separate and so distinct that they don't recognize how they could be, in fact, helping each other more. And so for entrepreneurs, maybe that's not the case, but for entrepreneurs, I would say, obviously make sure your business acumen is as on point as your creative side is, right? And so that level of, understanding your profit and loss statement and your cash flow and all of that stuff is as important as it is making the product and making sure the product is as good as it can be. If you're in a more corporate environment, then I would say to those creatives, leverage your marketing department, leverage your finance department, leverage whatever it is that you need in order to enhance your brand and push it further along. And I guess in my thinking from a corporate perspective, that's the level of networking that Linda and Rob have kind of already expressed.
Yes. Chris, what about you? What words of advice would you give anybody that wants to break into the industry?
So I think one of the most important things that we should all, ask ourselves before we enter any space, profession, anything that you want to do is to know or answer the question, why? Why do you want to be a brand owner? Or why do you want to be a perfumer? Or why do you want to be an executive at LVMH? Because there are going to be some really, really tough days along your journey, where some days you wake up and you're going to say, what am I doing? And what's happening? I mean, it's so funny because on those really, really, really tough days where nothing really goes right, I always just smile because I have to think about the days where everything goes right or most things go right. And what keeps me, moving forward and keeps me focused is to know why I'm doing what I'm doing, because your reason as to why you're doing it is almost more important as to what you're doing, because that is what you have to lean on when things get really, really tough, and things will get really, really tough for all of us. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to fail. If you're afraid to fail, then that means that you're afraid to take risks, and we all took risks, all of us. And you have to be courageous enough to know that there are going to be some things that you get wrong. I'm still getting some things wrong. As long as you get more right than wrong, that's the goal, because you have to learn from your mistakes to never do them again and, do them better the next time. And the last thing that I would say, and this is something that I had trouble with, not only in, just in my life in general, and I think that people, you cannot be afraid to ask for help, because we all need help. I am blown away by the intelligence and the charisma of everyone on this panel. I feel like I'm the least smartest person on the panel, and I'm pretty smart. So that means that I'm with a great group of people, but be around people who are smarter than you, that knows more than you, because they can help you. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because we all need it. If you think you're going to do this alone, you're not going to be able to. It's impossible. Know what you're good at. You know, I'm good at the creative part. I'm good at, you know, the marketing part and being the face of my brand. But I may not, as to Corey's point, I may not be great with the numbers and doing spreadsheets. So get someone around you who is smart enough to figure that out with you. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to fail, and have your why. Know why you're doing it, because you're gonna have to lean on that on days where you're gonna question if I'm doing the right thing, or you're gonna have a bad day, or so forth and so on. So those are my three.
Great. Well, that's a perfect segue to our next question. And this one actually is for Linda and for Corey. How can the industry be more accountable in driving DEI across all levels, whether that is scent making, marketing, creative, retail? What can the industry do to drive diversity forward? Linda, you want to?
Honestly, I feel like Corey should start, because this is definitely his area of expertise, and I'll follow up.
Okay.
You know, accountability looks different for different organizations and different brands. I think, you know, knowing that you even have to start is a level of accountability. Knowing that okay, look, we're falling short, right? I think for me though, I've been successful in diversity and inclusion by making sure I always connect it to the business. I connect it to money. I know that accountability can look like moral obligation or social responsibility obligation. Like, people do it because it's the right thing to do, and that's it. Like, that's the tagline. It's the right thing to do. We know that. We know that morally we're supposed to be treating everybody like they're good humans. We're supposed to be good humans. We know that. In business, though, CEOs wake up to make money. And so you have to figure out how to connect this to bottom line profit. That's accountability. And so whether you're literally putting in KPIs, key performance indicators, metrics around this stuff, like, okay, like I mentioned earlier, have we increased our foot traffic based on our marketing campaign? If we have not, then okay, that wasn't the right campaign. Hold marketing accountable from a quarterly performance perspective. Annual performance appraisals of your middle managers from your CEO on down. I think when you're talking about accountability, I can turn anything into a number, right? And so what is the progression, the performance increase over time that says our intentionality behind D&I, because we already think it's the right thing to do. So morally, we get it. Even theoretically, we might get it. How did we action it? Because you can measure action to show that, okay, we actually did something to improve. And so number of products. Did we put out more products that are diverse owned or appeal to a diverse community? Marketing campaigns, social media, like I can track all of this, right? I can turn it into a number. How many posts in the last quarter did pick one of LVMH's brands, or anybody's for that matter? Social media, Instagram alone, how many posts have a person of color in? How many posts have women in? How many posts have same-sex couples in? Like, I can do this all day. That's accountability, right? Because I can go back to that post, and over the last 3 months, I can count and tell you. And then, oh, by the way, there's the correlation of number of likes, number of comments, changing the demographic that shifts a certain narrative around our ability to storytell that attracts a new audience. But again, not just because it's the right thing to do, because then I can go tie that to sales, right? Was there an uptick in sales as a result of this? That's accountability, not talking about we want to do it. What's the action behind what we said we wanted to do that I can measure week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, until I show that there is an improved performance or not? Because if there isn't an improved performance, then okay, maybe I need to tweak what I'm doing. There's a lesson to be learned out of that as well. So when I hear the word accountability, it's numbers. I can turn it into a metric. I can track that performance to see if we're doing things the correct way or not. And again, if not, it's not scrap it and give up and walk away. Oh, well, Chris's product didn't move off the shelf. That's it. We're done. Linda's product didn't sell. We're done. No, pivot and let's figure out what we need to do to go get that audience, because that's going to be profit.
Brilliant.
I love that, because I think that, numbers, right? That's something that's really easy and translatable to see. And I think from the fragrance house side is looking internally and looking at those numbers. Interestingly, perfumers, I think that's one position that is relatively diverse because perfumers are representing generally their markets, but we're definitely not there yet. But I do believe that it's in management where we're lacking true representation. Fortunately, Givaudan is committed to improving representation within senior leadership, which I think is the most effective right now, with women and high growth markets meaning Latin America, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and China by 2030. But I think what's more important is that we need to make sure that we're having these kind of conversations internally across all levels of the company or the industry. We mentioned, and I think Helen and Corey are great examples that DEI specific positions are given more importance, are actually created roles that weren't really, definitely didn't exist in the industry, I would say before last year. And but I think it's important to know that it's not just up to one person or one team to make that change. It has to be across the organization. It has to be part of the company culture. And it's really the mindset of the company, with inclusive programs or, hiring methods, leadership, company charters, principles, all these things to really make lasting impact and progress. I do want to mention, though, that I think that as much as there's room for improvement, the industry, we have seen some accountability. And one example of that is the term Oriental in fragrance. And I need to thank the Fragrance Foundation, Linda Levy, and Michael Edwards, who made really bold statements this year in no longer using the term, really recognizing that it's outdated and it's offensive. And I'm happy to announce that Givaudan North America is also making this change. And, I just want to point out that it's interesting because the original fragrance classification of the Oriental family was ambre or ambery. And what we're doing is really only reinstituting the original term. So it's changes like this that demonstrate the industry is listening, the industry is seeing, and I think being on the right side of history.
That's great. Can I add on to that? Because that's so, by the way, that blows my mind that it even still existed. And I think it highlights the fact that I like to tell people we're in a constant state of unlearning and relearning. This is always happens in our life. We can't get complacent. It's always important to, start off. And I think about this like a strategy, like, Corey was talking about this, like, you have a strategy with KPIs and then go back and look at language because it does change. And it is always an opportunity to refresh and readdress it. I'm looking at it certainly with pronouns, and looking at how are we addressing the inclusion of non-binary folks? How are we making our brands accessible for trans folks? Our company accessible for trans folks to exist, and eliminating a dead name and going to a chosen name, and then policy and language, and then it goes into culture. And how does your culture support this initiative? And that takes deep work. It's not one training session and you're over. It takes a lot of energy and time and commitment to your point. It's not one person, it's the entire company committed to this initiative. And that's when change happens.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you, Rob. Really great insights there as well. So moving on to our next question, and this is actually for the whole panel, if you will. How can we all be more accountable when it comes to advancing DEI in this industry? Do you have any best practice tips or any suggestions for the layperson, anybody that's in the industry or not? What can we do to advance diversity? Anybody?
So I think, the point that Linda just brought up with the phrase Oriental. I just received a brief of a perfume that I'm working on, and it said Oriental fragrance, and I immediately reached back out and said, can we not use the word Oriental? Can we use the word ambery? Because it's outdated, and it's not, doesn't really kind of fit in the perfume world. We have to hold ourselves accountable. I can say till I'm blue in the face, we need to hold the retailers accountable. We need to hold the buyers and everyone else to make sure that things become more diverse and inclusive. But we, as the brand owners, we in position of power, we as the creators also have to hold ourselves accountable. If I had let that moment pass and I didn't say anything, then I'm just as bad as the person who I'm feeling, discriminated against.
Yes.
So we have to keep ourselves, ourselves accountable. We all have to be who we are in the face of others. We have to, and it's a cultural change, right? It's not something, you're right, Rob. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen instantly. But we have to be more inclusive. We have to. The beauty and diversity is that we all have different stories. We all have different perspectives. That's beautiful. Like, who wants the same perspective and the same idea? I'm bringing something different. Linda's bringing something different. Rob's bringing something different. And Corey is great at kind of bringing all that difference and saying, okay, well, how do we show this? How do we, express all of this? There's so much beauty in diversity. It should be celebrated. So I say that to say we have to hold ourselves accountable. Who you are. There needs to be like a cultural kind of realignment. You can't just say things that you think are appropriate. You have to understand it and believe it. You have to be able to understand the shoes that I walk in and the shoes that we all walk in. Because if you don't, you're not really going to understand and really be able to culturally or change your mindset about certain situations. So we have to hold ourselves accountable.
Anybody else want to take a stab at how we can all be more accountable?
I think I'm just going to tell a story and not make it too long. But when Macy's, when I worked there, launched employer resource groups and broke it into several, and with not at that time very many groups other than straight white men leading the organization. One of the employer resource groups was women of color. There was a certain acronym, I can't remember what it was, and I volunteered to be the executive in charge. And everyone assumed I would oversee the LGBTQ group, employee resource group, but I chose women of color. And because I actually am neither female, person of color, part indigenous, but that doesn't have much, but I wanted an opportunity to grow. I wanted to learn and to listen. And I knew I would grow and I could help advocate for them in a way that I think others couldn't. And I sat there for once a month for 18 months until finally they said, Rob, we want to close the door and we want to have a conversation with you about what it is to be a person of color in this space, in this company. And they closed the door, and it took that long for them to trust me. So I think the story is if you're in a position of privilege, lean into another group, see it from their set of eyes, and then go in and advocate for them. And that was one of the most powerful experiences of my life that I still lean on. And I'm doing that right now with the trans and non-binary community, listening and learning and advocating on their behalf. So step outside of your comfort zone and learn and advocate.
Brilliant. Corey, what about you?
Yeah, I think, to Rob's point, accountability starts with yourself. The idea or notion of being self-aware is a very real thing. I think people understand their values, they understand their beliefs, they know what they know about themselves. What I always challenge people is around what are the things you need to unlearn? And I think Rob mentioned that earlier, right? There's things that I teach unconscious bias classes. And so part of what you learn in unconscious bias is I think that the data point is 9. Like by the age of 9, your values and your beliefs are pretty much locked in. And they only actually change if you have like some sort of emotional, like tragic event that happens in your life. And it's because at the age of 9, all you're doing is by absorbing information from your parents, from your friends, from your teachers, from your coaches. Like it's just a data dump. These people are just pouring into you. What happens is when you become an adult, you now have your own opinion on some of those things, but you don't understand how deeply ingrained all of those lessons and those teachings were. And so we know there's real life situations, right, where mom might have been homophobic and you carried that weight with you until you became an adult and you realized, hold on, wait, I love the LGBTQ community. You have to unlearn what mom taught you. Right? And which is hard to do because mommy's always right. Right? And so you're now this fully formed, educated adult, and you have to unlearn some things that you've carried with you for a really long time. That level of self-awareness is so deep for people. And some people have a hard time processing it. What it does, though, is allows for space and allows for grace to learn new things. And that's where difference comes in. As Chris pointed out, right? Difference is a beautiful thing. The problem is people process difference as less than. You're different from me, therefore you're less than me. When the reality is there's a value in difference. Innovation comes from difference. Productivity, efficiency. Like again, I take it back to business terms, right? All of that comes from a bunch of different people sitting around a table and literally debating until the best idea rises to the top. Because if you've got a bunch of sameness sitting around the table, you're going to get to yes like in 2 minutes. This meeting is really short because we all think the same. We're all going to agree really quickly. I want difference around the table. The accountability is how do I own the fact that I need to recognize I need difference around the table? So it's an individual perspective first, my own self-awareness, and then what do I need to do about it? Then it becomes a team accountability. Now that I've got multiple voices around the room, are we all going to hold each other accountable, as Rob and Chris said? And that leads to kind of an organizational accountability where if you've got that happening in enough parts of the organization, marketing, product, design, development, R&D, if all of that is happening, now you've got an inclusive environment where, okay, we're celebrating, we're thinking through all of these lenses, all of these perspectives, all of these experiences that everybody has had, right? The finance guy doesn't need to know fragrances. He just needs to know how to make Chris's company profitable. That's all he needs to know, right? But I need him to be great at his area to contribute to the greater good. And so accountability, it's individual, then it's like team, and then it's like organization, but it's a level of self-awareness, unlearning, learning, respecting difference. All of that contributes to, what ultimately is what we call inclusion, which is a simple word, but it's got multiple layers clearly.
Great. Linda, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Corey, obviously the importance of unlearning, right? And I think just training and having these conversations within companies is so paramount to even starting to change the organization. I also want to, because I think it's always interesting to have really applicable things that you can do in a company. And a few weeks ago, the CW had a conference, and I have to reference that because Tyal Hayes from BET, he did some really amazing research on Black women in the beauty industry that I was really blown away by. But I think that there was one really effective and implementable way to change the workplace is by taking an existing program that's working really well and making it more inclusive. And, if there's a strong mentorship program, for example, include that person or those people. Because I think and he mentioned this, if you're creating a DEI specific program, then you're only going to further isolate those people who aren't included. So it needs to be about integrating into the parts of the company that are working really well. And I thought that was a great easy way to kind of start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
I'd say one more thing, and I think, a lot of companies that I work with and doing it in the education space, if someone looks at the unlearning and the relearning as an inconvenience for them, that here we go again, there's a new word for this, or here we go again, there's probably not a place for them in your company if you want to grow and to evolve into a company for the future. And I just think it's worth keeping an eye out for that, because I get a lot of eye rolls, like, oh God, this is going to be really hard for me. You know what? Guess what? We are moving forward, moving fast. And people who aren't willing to get on board, there's not a lot of room for you, unless that's the way I see it. And it's just got to be, that's the facts, get on board or get off board, and it's just that simple to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, did we cover you? Did you want to add anything else about what we all can do to be more accountable?
You did. I went first, but I just, if I may,
take us home.
My mom is a Black woman that grew up in the South. So there were some things that I heard as a child from her pain and her anger that as I got older, I had to unlearn. And it's so powerful when you do that, because Corey, you're right. You actually open more space to learn other things. It's like, it's like one of those like flickering lights. When you break it, it gets brighter. It's like it allows for more kind of love and empathy, and it transforms you into a different person. And to this day, I still have conversations with my mom. But to unlearn is very difficult. It is, and I think that that's something that we all should, at least try to unlearn the things that we know should be different, that we know should change, to allow those other things to come into your life: love, empathy, compassion. There's three things that are pillars for my life, my brand, and everything else: love, empathy, and compassion.
Love that. Love that. Well, this is coming up on our final question before we open it up to questions from the audience. And this is really probably the most exciting thing about this conversation, is what can we do to get behind and support the Fragrance Forward TFF movement? We're trying to make this a movement. It's hashtag Fragrance Forward TFF. How can we all as a community support this? Because it's not just a trending topic. It's something that Linda and the leadership at TFF are very, very supportive of and behind 100%. So this is for everybody. Linda, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think it's talking about it today, continue talking about it, and take action. I really loved how Rob and Corey talked about, ally advocacy and activism in a way that everybody can take part in a way that they're comfortable. And so, I've been learning so much in this last year. I'm still learning. I don't think any of us will ever stop learning. Hopefully, that's kind of the joy in life. But that there's different, realities in existence for different people, and we can't boil it down to just this 1 hour panel. So I'm hoping this conversation just continues and inspires the people who are listening to have this conversation around DEI.
Corey?
Rob made a comment earlier from his time at Macy's around employee resource groups. And, I actually consider the Fragrance Foundation the employee resource group for the fragrance industry. Like, you literally are bringing a bunch of people together kind of around this affinity for this particular industry, but they're coming from all different places. And what I love about ERGs, and what I tell people internally about ERGs, is ERGs serve 3 points. And so the Fragrance Foundation, I'm rewriting your mission statement right now in real time. But it's networking first and foremost, right? So just the ability for everybody to kind of collaborate, come together, meet new people. Rob and I knew each other. We have a mutual friend. I don't know how long it would have taken me to get to Chris and Linda were it not for the Fragrance Foundation, right? And so already there's a level of networking that took place organically just for us coming together for this, that the Fragrance Foundation is the core of. So networking. The second piece is mentorship. It's now the responsibility of all of us to make sure that we're taking care of each other in terms of, well, what does Chris need? What does Linda need? Is there somebody here that I can make an introduction to, guide them on their journey in whatever possible way? What does Rob need? So this idea of, making sure that they're connected to someone above them is a relative term, but an executive, a CEO, a retail, a buyer, or whatever it is, to help them further their journey is critical. The last one is what we call is sponsorship. And that's when I'm talking about you in a room you're not even in. I'm advocating on your behalf when you're not even around, right? And we use those terms in corporate America, like in terms of how is somebody going to get promoted? So their mentor, some executive that is now mentoring them on their journey, is telling someone else how great they are. They're not even in the room. They can't even get into that room. They're not even high enough up the totem pole to get into that room, but somebody's in that room dropping their name. And so networking leads to mentorship. Mentorship leads to sponsorship. I've got a bunch of meetings coming up where Rob, Chris, and Linda's name are going to come up, and they're not even going to be in that room. They're not even going to know I'm talking about them. That's what you just did. That's what the Fragrance Foundation is doing. And that's what, Fragrance Forward is, to me, all about. It's that level of us making sure we're taking care of each other, whether we're in each other's face or not, that is so powerful around what you guys are trying to put together here.
Thank you. Well said. Rob?
How do you follow that? I would say embrace change, embrace the fact that we've said it before, like embrace the unlearning and the relearning, surround yourself by people who have different points of views and leverage your sphere of influence, whether that's your school that your kids go to, whether it's your community, whether it's your faith-based place, and leverage your sphere of influence. When you see somebody misgendered, when you see somebody use a racist comment, when you see something happen, make the change, lean into it, and don't be afraid of the consequences. Sure, your mom may be mad because you were in Thanksgiving dinner, but you know what? Like Uncle Bill needed to be told he's racist. And it doesn't come at opportune times. And I think it's, I have thrown myself into this space. We all have thrown ourselves into this space and still doing our jobs at our same time. But God, it feels so good when you're doing the right thing. It feels so rewarding when you wake up in the day and you're like, God, I'm going to work to improve people's lives somehow. And it's not all about me. It's when it doesn't become about me, it becomes about other people. It feels incredibly rewarding and makes life really worth waking up for every day.
Wonderful, wonderful. Chris, what are your thoughts on Fragrance Forward TFF and how we as a community can get behind it?
Well, first off, I think that we have a duty to be more accessible.
Yes.
There are going to be people who are going to lean on us and want to know, how, there's the why, there's the what, and there's the how, right? And I mentioned earlier, being that trailblazer, you have a duty to make sure that you bring people along with you. And they have a lot of questions. There's a lot of layers into what we do. I mean, it starts, from A to Z, and being accessible and touchable to people is helpful. So we have a duty to help other people. The second thing I would say is being open to have that uncomfortable conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When everything shut down back in 2020, I remember really needing to speak to President Linda about me being a Black man in perfume and how we need to magnify this, because it's a big deal, because there's no one in the space, well, very few people, I'm not going to say I'm the first, but there are very few people in a position that can speak about being minority, diverse Black men in perfume. And I remember saying to myself, how am I going to bring this up to President Linda? And I think at this point, Charnay, she had just come on, or she was there, and she was wonderful because we all kind of had a conversation, and it was uncomfortable, but it should have been, because that's when things happen, when you are allowing yourself to have uncomfortable conversations. And come to find out, she was like, Chris, I'm so glad you brought this up, because these are the things we're thinking about doing. And, so I'm not going to say that conversation started everything moving forward, but it was something that needed to be said on my end. And, being a Black man in perfume and opening it up to all other avenues, whether you're Asian American and you're a woman, or you're LGBTQ, or you're a Black man or Black woman in perfume, the uncomfortable conversations needed to be had. And from that spurred where we are now. And we have a duty. We have a duty to, be prosperous in our own rights, but we also need to teach. We need to listen. We need to be open. We need to be accessible.
Absolutely. Wow, this was amazing. Thank you so much. We are going to now take some questions from our participants, and I'm going to turn it back over to Linda.
A great question that came from the audience is, what does a truly diverse and inclusive fragrance industry look and feel like to you? Who wants to take it first?
I'll take it.
Okay.
It's colorful. It's there's white, there's Black, there's Asian, there's Indian, there's men, women, transgender. The beauty and diversity, like I said before, is that we all have different stories, and we have something incredible to bring to the forefront. So there has to be a time in perfume where it just doesn't look the same, and that nothing is abnormal when you see it. It's like, there's an Asian woman who's the CEO of this fragrance house. Oh, well, there's a Black man with his brand, and it's next to Tom Ford and Bergdorf Goodman. Oh, where there's a LGBTQ brand that's flourishing and doing incredible and telling these great stories about humanity. Like, none of that should shock people at some point. Or at least we hope at some point that it won't. But we do have a long way to go. We can talk about it, but the best thing to do is to have those actionable items. It's like, okay, it will be great to talk about, I hope at some point we have that. But to see me, Rob, Linda, and Corey, and Helen, and Charnay, and Prez doing it, that to me is more important than actually having the discussion is important, but to actually be doing it for people to see us. There's going to be a little boy who loves fragrance but didn't understand why he loved fragrance. He's not going to be able to afford, fragrance or cologne. And then when he gets his first job working at a deli in the mall, he's going to run over to Macy's and buy Obsession for Men. And his love for perfume is going to start, because that's my story. But now there's going to be a little Black boy who says, okay, so now what? And I'm here to say, I'm going to show you now what. This is what you can do. So that is the point.
Wow, Chris, thank you. Does anyone else want to answer that question of what does that future fragrance industry look like when it truly becomes diverse and inclusive?
I'll say, on top of Chris, a few things. First of all, for the big houses, the big companies have machines, and the smaller brands, the more diverse brands, don't plug easily into your machines. We don't have the kind of money to pay for an ad the way that L'Oreal may or Estee Lauder. We don't have the manufacturing supply chain that, some of the other places have. So, for us to be inclusive, we have to think differently and make space and create opportunities for these brands to end up on the shelves and to sell. And that means that you're going to have to do things that are untraditional to make space for untraditional brands to be successful. So I'd say that's number one. And number two, let's start thinking differently. Let's start thinking, I couldn't help but think about how do we create a scent that is handicap accessible, that somehow the spray pump doesn't go this way. Like, who's doing the innovation to create something different? And so how are we always thinking ahead, not just the people who we know aren't at the table, but who we don't even know aren't at the table yet. So think it through innovation, think differently, and include more and more people through the process. We're like I said, we're never done. You're never done with this journey. It's let's keep pushing and challenging each other.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to mention, it's been mentioned that fragrance is very historical. And so it's really hard to not sometimes tie the history and associate it with what is good. And so sometimes for me, what it looks like is that there's a future, like Chris said, that's colorful, but it's not about eliminating the Europeans, right? It's that there is good from bringing people of different backgrounds and perspectives to the table, so that it's interesting, and that there's not a fear of bringing something different or new, because I think that we as an industry really love to do more of the same thing. So I'm interested in this, future forward innovation, doing and looking at things differently so that our industry can continue to flourish.
And Corey, for many years, there wasn't someone who was designated in charge of DEI. I consider that everyone in the whole foundation is on the committee. We're not just picking a crowd and saying who wants to get involved. It's a requirement to be involved. It's a requirement to take action. So you sit on top of so many brands, and I love that your experience is outside the industry. So from where you've been or where you think we're going, what's the future we can look forward to so that we can see a diverse, inclusive industry?
It's exactly that. I think, everybody's response, what we're actually talking about is cognitive diversity of thought, right? But that diversity of thought is informed by your lived physical experience. And so what does it mean to be an Asian woman in this country that informed how she processes things in a certain way that she's channeling through her organization, right? And so cognitive diversity is what we're actually striving for. That's what I was talking about earlier around making sure that there are enough difference around the table that you're making a better and informed decision about whatever it is we're talking about. But that cognitive diversity doesn't just stop with your physical dimensions of diversity. It's not only about your gender or ethnicity or sexual orientation or whatever it is. It's also about, what'd you do before you ran this company, right? Maybe there's a skill you learned when you were, I don't know, backpacking through the Grand Canyon, or when you ran another type of business. Or maybe there's somebody in healthcare right now. There's somebody in healthcare right now or in pharmaceuticals that knows science and knows how to put together ingredients in a different way. Maybe there's somebody in tech. I don't know, maybe they work at Tesla. I don't know, but you know what I mean? They're having an experience. They're learning a skill set. They're processing what they do for a living in a way that we haven't even figured out how it applies to fragrance yet. And that's what I'm talking about. Yes, we're all experiencing our lives through our physical and our lived experiences, but we're processing it in a mental way that can produce a different output to all of these organizations and all of our businesses and all of our industries. And so, ultimately for me, yes, it is about making sure we've got more people of color, making sure there's more women, making sure there's more, making sure all of that primary stuff that we can physically see. Yes, we need more representation that we can physically see. But what I'm ultimately trying to get to is, what's your thought process and how that, if it's varied enough, can actually create innovation, create productivity, create more money, right? We know we're leaving money on the table. Everybody knows that because we're not tapping into enough Asian women or Black men or LGBT. We know that. But how are we going to tap into it? And so that cognitive diversity is what's the real driver behind, the future of DNI.
I also think it's the Fragrance Foundation in the USA that needs to lead this. We have the greatest melting pot. Everyone is in love with fragrance. That's part of, the foundation now, but we are not addressing the population. So for me, when we'll never reach the ultimate goal because we'll always be working towards being better at it, but we need, I think a lot of you said this throughout the conversation, to celebrate. It's not enough to recognize, it's not enough to talk about it. We should be celebrating it. And when I met Chris and I said, you could get into a lot of distribution, but you may go bankrupt doing it. It really turned the key on this situation, because in the end, you're right. We're here to actually make some money selling fragrance, but we will not be capable of doing that unless we really talk to everyone who's part of the population. I have one last question, and I think then we're going to go, if I can, because you've been remarkable. One other aspect of DEI is ageism. It came up in some questions, and I've recently read Michael Clinton's Roar, and Rob is actually mentioned in it. It talks about people completely changing their lives midstream, and ageism is also a topic. People being hired, fired, moved, or put in a specific role because of their age. Does anyone have anything on this particular topic? It did come up from our audience.
Yeah, I'm honored to be in the book as one of the subjects that Michael talks about, and taking that leap away from corporate America, that safety net, and jumping in. Fortunately, had saved enough money to do that, but it takes courage to do that, to go into that second act. But I think too often folks, certainly my contemporaries at Macy's and other companies, were let go. Big salaries, lots of experience. But I think if a person's willing to realize what they don't know and complement it with somebody who knows a different set of skills, because generationally, like, we didn't grow up with the internet, we didn't grow up with like a lot of this stuff. But if you can take somebody with a great history and great knowledge and match them with somebody who's complementary, who's savvy in other areas, we talked about that balance of art and creativity with business. That's the perfect combination. And I think kicking out people who have aged out, or you think have aged out because they have no more room, nothing else to offer, is a huge missed opportunity. But then there's also a second act, and the second act Michael talks about is, maybe it isn't at that place. Maybe there's a second act for you to take what you know and to leverage that muscle and to reassess, not just skate off into, your age 65 of retiring, which, by the way, I don't think anybody I know is going to retire at the age of 65. I'm pretty sure we're all going to be working till the age of 80. And how are you going to do it joyfully? How are you going to do it through growth and through just feeling really good about yourself and what you have to offer? So it's a good book. Certainly, I recommend it. But ageism is a real thing in representation in both intern site companies, but also externally. Rarely do you ever see someone who's over the age of 40 in a marketing campaign. And so, redefining what beauty is. Beauty comes from the inside.
Those were great insights and perspectives. Thank you to this amazing panel. You were truly inspiring. Today's event is a takeoff, as I call it, not a culmination, and we will not stop. To that end, I want to share with you a major component of #FragranceForwardTFF. the Fragrance Foundation DEI Pledge. This is a signatory pledge in which TFF is literally pledging to commit ourselves to aligning with hashtag Fragrance Forward TFF by taking actionable steps to make our industry truly and measurably inclusive, diverse, and equitable for everyone. Here is the pledge. I commit to being fragrance forward by holding myself and my company accountable at all levels to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. I commit to breaking barriers for people of all backgrounds in launching, growing, and sustaining careers in the fragrance industry. I commit to actionable steps to broadening my perspective, changing my workplace, and changing the industry. This concludes our event, but today together, we are taking steps and taking action. I encourage all of you to help us spread the message. Also, please be sure to complete the survey we will be sharing with all of today's audience very soon. Our next issue of Accords, the Fragrance Foundation's monthly digital magazine, will provide additional information and answer even more questions that our participating audience posed to us, but time did not allow today. For now, I leave you with this. Be a part of this movement today, together, and moving forward. Fragrance forward. Thank you very much.